A wet boot stepped through the restaurant door. A thin hand pushed the brass handle, slow and shaking. Rain dripped from a torn coat onto the polished floor. 11 men sat at the long center table. Forks froze in the middle of their plates. The bouncer rose from his stool and stopped halfway. The girl walked past him like she could not see him. She walked between the tables, past the wine cart, past the old framed photographs on the wall. She stopped in front of the man at the head of the table. He set down his glass. He looked at her face. She set a small silver locket on the white tablecloth, right next to his bread plate. Her name was Liana. She had not said her name in 15 years. She did not say it now. She just stood there, soaked, gaunt, waiting. Stay with me on this one. The man at the head of the table was the Don of the North Side. People called him Mr. V. Nobody used his full name in public anymore. He had run 6 blocks of red brick and 40 restaurants and 1 funeral home for almost 3 decades. He was 64 years old. He had a thick neck. He had a scarred hand. He had a soft voice. He never raised it. He did not need to. When he looked at a man, the man either smiled or went very still. Tonight he was looking at a girl. He did not smile. He did not go still either. He just looked. His eyes moved from her face to the locket and back to her face. He did this 3 times. Then he picked up his wine glass and finished it in one long pull. He set the glass down very carefully on the cloth. The 11 men at the table watched him. The bouncer at the door watched him. The bartender behind the long oak bar watched him. Nobody in the room moved. The girl was shaking. Not from fear. From cold. Her coat was wet through. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. She was so thin that the bones in her wrists looked like wood. She had not eaten in 2 days. She had walked 9 miles in the rain to reach this door. She had stood across the street for 40 minutes before she crossed. She had told herself if she did not cross now, she never would. So she crossed. The Don's underboss was sitting on his left. The underboss was a tall man with a flat face and pale eyes. His name was Carlo. He had been with Mr. V since they were both 19 years old. Carlo looked at the girl, and his fingers stopped on his knife. Just for a second. Just long enough for one man at the table to notice. That man was old Tommaso, who saw everything and said nothing. Tommaso filed the moment away in the back of his head and kept eating his veal. Tommaso was 71 years old. He had been with the family longer than anyone alive. He had been at Mr. V's wedding. He had been at Mr. V's wife's funeral. He had been at the empty grave they had dug for the baby. He had watched his boss age 20 years in one afternoon that day. He had also watched Carlo handle the funeral arrangements. He had thought at the time that Carlo was being a good brother. Tommaso did not think that now. He had not thought that for about 4 minutes. 4 minutes was all it took for an old man with patient eyes to put the puzzle together. He kept eating. He did not look up. Mr. V picked up the locket. He held it in his big scarred palm. The silver was tarnished black around the edges. The chain was broken in one place and tied with a knot. He turned it over. On the back, scratched into the metal with a pin, was a single word. Just 3 letters. He read those letters, and his face did not move. The room did not know it, but inside his chest, something very old and very heavy turned over once and went still. He clicked the locket open with his thumbnail. Inside, behind the cracked glass, was a small photograph. A woman with dark hair was holding a baby. The woman was smiling. The baby was reaching for the chain around her neck. The woman in the photograph had been dead for 15 years. The baby in the photograph had been declared dead for 15 years. Mr. V closed the locket. He looked at the girl for a long time. He did not speak. He did not stand. He did not call anyone over. He simply pointed at the empty chair across from him. The girl sat down. The chair was too big for her. Her wet coat squeaked on the leather. The waiter, a young man named Paolo, came over with the carafe and froze when Mr. V lifted one finger. Paolo set the carafe down. He backed away. Mr. V leaned forward and said 3 words to the girl in a voice so low only she could hear. He said, "Eat something first." He pushed his own plate across the table. It still had half a steak and a pile of roasted potatoes. The girl did not pick up a fork. Her hands were shaking too hard. So Mr. V picked up the fork himself. He cut a small piece of steak. He held it out across the table. The girl opened her mouth. She chewed. She swallowed. She did this 3 times. Carlo, the underboss, watched the whole thing with that flat face of his. He cleared his throat once. Mr. V did not look at him. The other men at the table started to eat again, slowly, carefully, like people in a church. The dining room of Vincenzo's, the Don's restaurant, was full of regular customers that night. Bankers, 2 judges, a woman from the city council with her husband. Every one of them pretended to be looking at their plates. Every one of them was watching the table at the back. The rain kept hitting the front window. The candle between Mr. V and the girl burned crooked. After a while, the girl stopped shaking. She put down her water glass and finally looked up. She said one sentence, also very quietly. She said, "I came because she told me to." Mr. V said, "Who?" The girl said, "My mother. Last week, right before she died." Mr. V did not move for the count of 5. Then he stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not break anything. He simply said, "Dinner is over, gentlemen, the kitchen is closed." The 11 men stood. The other tables stood. Within 4 minutes, the dining room of Vincenzo's was empty except for the Don, the girl, the underboss, and old Tommaso, who pretended to be very busy folding his napkin. The bouncer locked the front door from the inside. The bartender pulled the iron shutters down over the long oak bar. The kitchen staff left through the alley. The big neon sign in the window flicked off. Mr. V sat back down across from the girl. He spoke without looking at Carlo. He said, "Get Father Lucia on the phone. We are going to need a hair sample by morning." Carlo said, "Of course." Carlo went into the back. Carlo did not come out for a long time. And in the back office, behind a closed door, Carlo picked up a different phone. He dialed a number he had not dialed in 15 years. He spoke 4 words into it. He said, "The girl is here." Then he hung up and stared at the wall. Mr. V watched the girl drink a second glass of water. He asked her, careful and slow, where she had been. She told him in pieces. A house in the woods 3 states away. An old woman who was not her mother but who said she was. A man who came and went, who hit the old woman who scared the girl. A school she stopped going to when she was 9. A barn she slept in for a winter when she was 12. The man dying of liver disease in a hospital bed last year. The old woman telling her on her own deathbed last week that there was a locket buried under the 3rd floorboard in the back room, and a name on the back of it, and a city, and a restaurant called Vincenzo's, and a man named Mr. V who was her father, and that she should run before Carlo found her, because Carlo had been paying the old woman for 15 years to keep her hidden. Mr. V listened to all of this without moving. He did not interrupt. He did not look angry. He looked, if anything, very tired. Believe me, tired was the most dangerous look that face could make. Tired was the look he had worn the morning they pulled his wife's car out of the river. Tired was the look he had worn the night he made his first decision as the head of a family at the age of 31. Tired meant the part of him that asked questions had already finished asking. Tired meant the part of him that decided things had already started to move. The bartender, who had worked behind that oak bar for 19 years, saw the look and very quietly set down the bottle he was holding. He did not want any sudden sounds in the room. When the girl was done, he said one thing. He said, "You are safe now." He said it like a fact, not a promise. Then he stood up and walked behind the bar. He picked up a clean wine glass and a linen cloth, and he started to wipe the glass. Slowly, round and round. He wiped it until it was perfectly clear. The girl sat at the table watching him. Old Tommaso pretended to read the wine list. The rain on the window slowed to a soft hiss. The candle finished burning and went out on its own. Mr. V kept wiping the glass. Outside in the alley, a car door slammed. A single shoe scraped on the gravel behind the kitchen. Then a second one. Then a third. Mr. V set the wine glass down. He did not look up. He said, "Tommaso." Tommaso said, "I heard it." Mr. V said, "How many?" Tommaso tilted his head a quarter inch and listened. He said, "4." Mr. V said, "Side door or kitchen door?" Tommaso said, "Kitchen." Mr. V walked around the bar. He took the girl by the elbow, gentle as a man lifting a bird, and he walked her behind the bar and pushed her down so she was sitting on the floor between the ice bin and the back wall. He said to her, "Do not stand up no matter what you hear." The girl nodded. Mr. V reached under the bar and pulled out a short pump shotgun that had been screwed to the underside of the counter for 19 years. He checked the load. He put it back. He did not take it with him. Instead, he walked, empty-handed, across the dining room and through the swinging kitchen door alone. Carlo was already in the kitchen when Mr. V pushed the door open. Carlo was standing by the walk-in freezer with 3 men behind him. The 3 men were not from the family. Mr. V had never seen them before. One of them had a pistol out and down by his thigh. Mr. V looked at Carlo for a long time. He said, 15 years. Carlo said, "Boss, listen." Mr. V said, 15 years you sat at my table. 15 years you went to my wife's grave with me. 15 years you called me brother. Carlo opened his mouth. Mr. V held up one hand. Carlo closed his mouth. Mr. V said, "You told me my daughter drowned in the river with my wife. You told me you searched for 2 months. You told me you carried her shoe back to me yourself." Carlo's pale eyes moved sideways just once toward the man with the pistol. The man with the pistol started to lift the gun. Mr. V did not turn around. He simply said, "Tommaso." A single dry crack came from behind the swinging door. The man with the pistol fell sideways into a stack of clean dish racks. The other 2 men froze. Tommaso walked into the kitchen with an old service revolver in his hand, and his other hand still holding his napkin. He nodded politely at the 2 remaining strangers, the way a man might nod at neighbors on a Sunday morning. He said, "Please put the hardware on the floor slowly." The 2 men put their hardware on the floor slowly. Carlo did not move. Mr. V walked up to him, close enough to smell the cologne, and he said one more thing just for Carlo. He said, "Why?" Carlo's mouth tightened. He said, "Because the south side was supposed to be mine, and if she came back, you would have made her the heir." Mr. V looked at him for one long second. Then he said, "Get him out of my sight." Tommaso and one of the kitchen porters, who had quietly come back through the alley door, took Carlo by both arms. They walked him into the cold storage room. They closed the door. And here's the thing. Mr. V did not hear what came next, because he had already turned around and walked back to the bar where the girl was still sitting on the floor. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these. Now, back to the restaurant. Mr. V crouched down behind the bar. He put both his big scarred hands on the floor next to the girl's knees. He said, "Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head no. He said, "Can you stand up?" The girl nodded. He helped her up. She was so light he barely felt the weight. He walked her back to the table. He sat her down. He pulled a clean linen napkin from the next table over and laid it across her shoulders like a small blanket. He poured her a fresh glass of water with his own hand. He waited until she had taken 3 full sips before he spoke again. His voice was lower now, almost gentle, the way a man might speak to a frightened animal that had finally walked close enough to touch. He went into the back office. He came out with a thick folder. Inside the folder were old hospital records, old photographs, a wedding ring on a chain, and a small pink baby blanket sealed in plastic. He set the folder on the table in front of her. He opened it slowly so she could see. He said, "This is your mother." He said, "This is the house you were born in." He said, "This is the day they brought you home." The girl looked at every page. She did not cry. She had cried out a long time ago. But her hands stopped shaking. That was something. "Mr. V said, in the morning, we will take a sample from your hair, and we will send it to a doctor I trust, and in 3 days we will know for sure." The girl said, "You don't believe me." "Mr. V said, "I believed you the second you walked through the door." He tapped the folder with one finger. He said, "This is not for me. This is for everyone else, so that nobody can ever say a word against you for as long as you live." The girl understood. She nodded. Mr. V leaned back in his chair. For the first time in 15 years, his shoulders dropped a full inch. He looked in that moment, less like a Don and more like a tired father in a wet city late on a Tuesday night. He said, "Do you have a place to stay?" The girl shook her head. He said, "You do now. There's a room upstairs above the kitchen. It has a window that faces the church. Your mother used to like that window." He stood up. He held out his arm to her. She took it. They walked together to the back staircase, and Tommaso, standing by the kitchen door with his revolver hidden under his napkin again, stepped quietly aside to let them pass. But the night was not over. Because Carlo had made one phone call from the back office, and that phone call was still working its way across the city. At 11:47 that night, a black car with no plates pulled up to the curb across the street from Vincenzo's. 3 more men got out. They stood under the awning of the closed bakery across the road. They watched the dark windows of the restaurant. They were waiting for a signal that was never going to come, because the man who was supposed to send the signal was now lying very still on the floor of a cold storage room. After 22 minutes, the leader of the 3 men got tired of waiting. He crossed the street. He tried the front door of Vincenzo's. It was locked. He went around to the alley. The alley was where Tommaso had been quietly sitting on a folding chair for the last hour, in the dark, drinking a small cup of espresso that the kitchen porter had made him before going home. Tommaso heard the boots before he saw the men. He set his cup down. He clicked the safety off his old service revolver. He waited until all 3 were in the alley. Then he said, "Good evening." The 3 men spun. There was a very short conversation that involved no words. When it was over, Tommaso called upstairs on the kitchen intercom. He said, "3 more out back, boss." Mr. V's voice came through the small brass speaker. It said, "I heard them." He had been sitting on a chair by the door of the upstairs room. He had not put down the shotgun yet. The girl was asleep on the small bed by the window. She had fallen asleep within 90 seconds of her head touching the pillow. She had been awake for 30 hours. Mr. V did not move from the chair. He just watched her chest go up and down. Up and down. He had not watched another human being breathe like that since she was a baby. He thought about every birthday that had gone by without her. 15 of them. He had bought a small cake for the first 3. He had eaten alone at the kitchen counter of the apartment above the restaurant. After the 3rd year, he had stopped buying the cake. After the 5th year, he had stopped counting the dates. After the 10th year, he had stopped speaking her name out loud. And here she was breathing. Slow and even. Real. He set the shotgun on the floor next to the chair. He folded his hands in his lap. He watched her sleep until the first gray light came through the window. When morning came, the rain had stopped. The street outside Vincenzo's was washed clean and shining. A boy on a bicycle threw a stack of folded newspapers onto the wet sidewalk. The kitchen porter unlocked the alley door from the inside. The bartender came in at 6 and started polishing glasses without saying a word. Old Tommaso went home to his wife and his bowl of farina. Father Lucia, who was 78 years old and had baptized the girl 22 years ago, came in through the back with a small leather bag and took a careful sample of her hair while she slept. He kissed the top of her head before he left. He said quietly to Mr. V on the way out, "I think you already know my friend." Mr. V said, "I do." Father Lucia said, "Then why the test?" Mr. V said, "Because the rest of them are going to need it on paper." Father Lucia nodded. He left. At 9:14 that morning, the girl woke up. She did not know where she was for the first 3 seconds. Then she saw the window facing the church, and she remembered. She sat up slowly. The locket was on the small table beside her, polished clean. The chain had been repaired. She picked it up. She looked at the photo inside. She closed. A piece of toast. A slice of orange. She ate every bite. Mr. V did not say a word the entire time. He just watched her eat. When she was done, he turned on his stool to face her. He said 3 things. The girl nodded. He said first, "From today, this is your home. You do not have to stay if you do not want to. But the door is always open." The girl swallowed. He said second, "Nobody will ever touch you again. Not in this city. Not in any city." The girl nodded slowly. He said third. He paused. He looked down at his coffee cup for a second. He said third, "I am sorry. I am sorry that I believed the wrong man. I am sorry that I did not look harder. I am sorry that I let 15 years go by." The girl looked at him for a long moment. She reached up and unhooked the locket from her own neck. She held it out across the bar. He took it. She said, "My mother told me to give this back to you when I found you, so you would know it was really me." Mr. V held the locket in his palm. He closed his fingers around it. He held it tight for a long second. Then he opened his hand again. He stood up. He walked around the bar. He stood behind her, gentle, and he hooked the chain back around her own neck. He said, "No. You keep it. It was always yours." The girl did not say anything. She just put her hand over the locket on her chest. Outside, the morning bell from the church across the street started to ring. The bartender pretended to be very busy. Mr. V sat back down on his stool. He picked up his coffee. He took a sip. The bell rang 9 times. When it stopped, the city seemed quieter than it had been in 15 years. Mr. V said, "What would you like to do today?" The girl thought about it. She said, "I would like to go to her grave." Mr. V set his cup down. He said, "Of course. We will go after lunch." The girl said, "All right." Then she said, "Can we eat lunch here?" Mr. V smiled for the first time. It was a small smile. It was not the smile of a Don. It was the smile of a father. He said, "Every day for the rest of your life if you want." The bartender wiped a glass that did not need wiping. The kitchen porter, passing through with a tray of clean cutlery, pretended very hard not to be watching. Paolo the waiter came in early for his shift, and stopped just inside the door when he saw the Don and the girl at the bar. He took off his coat without speaking. He tied on his apron without speaking. He went to set the corner table, the one by the window, the one Mr. V had not used for the last 15 years, because his wife used to sit in the chair facing the street. Paolo set 2 places at that table. He did not need to ask. Everyone in the room understood what was happening at the same speed, the way a flock of birds turns in the sky. That afternoon, at the cemetery on the hill above the river, Mr. V and the girl stood together in front of a gray headstone. The headstone had 2 names on it. The first name belonged to the woman in the locket. The second name belonged to a child. Mr. V looked at the second name for a long time. He said quietly, "We will fix that." He said, "We will take her name off this stone tomorrow." The girl knelt down in the wet grass. She put her hand flat on the cold marble. She said, "Hi, Mama." The wind moved in the cypress trees behind them. Mr. V stood with his hands folded in front of him. He did not cry. He had not cried in 15 years. He was not going to start now. But his throat moved once, very slowly, and he had to look away at the river for a minute before he was steady again. On the way back down the hill, the girl walked beside him. He matched her short steps. He did not rush her. They got into the back of an old black sedan that had been waiting at the gate. The driver was a young man, polite, quiet, who had been with the family for 6 years. He nodded at the girl in the rearview mirror and said nothing. They drove past the church and the bakery and the row of red brick houses and the bridge over the canal. The girl looked out the window the whole way. At one point she said, "What was she like?" Mr. V said, "Your mother." The girl nodded. Mr. V said, "She was small. She was funny. She made everybody who walked into the room feel taller. She used to put salt on her watermelon. She used to fall asleep in the middle of movies. She used to call me a foolish old bear, and I am." The girl smiled. It was a small smile, very thin, but it was real. Mr. V saw it in the corner of his eye. He pretended not to. He let her have it. He looked out at the gray river instead. The bridge over the canal slid past. The old iron rails were dark with the morning's rain. 2 pigeons sat on the top rail and did not move as the car went by. Mr. V thought, without saying it, that the city looked exactly the same as it had on the night he had been told his family was dead, and exactly the same as it looked now that one of them was alive again. The city did not care either way. The city only knew how to keep going. That was all right. He did not need the city to feel anything. He only needed the girl in the seat next to him to keep breathing, and to eat a real lunch when they got back, and maybe, if she felt like it, to fall asleep on the couch in his office after, the way her mother used to do on slow afternoons. Anything beyond that, he would take as a gift. The car pulled back up to Vincenzo's, just as the early dinner crowd was starting to arrive. Mr. V got out first. He held the door for the girl. The young waiter Paolo was already setting tables. The bartender was lighting the candles. The big neon sign in the window flickered back on. People walked past on the wet sidewalk. They glanced through the windows and saw the Don sitting at his usual back table with a young woman beside him. They did not stare. They did not stop. But by the end of that week, every person in those 6 blocks of red brick knew, in the quiet way that those neighborhoods know things, that Mr. V's daughter had come home, and that the South Side was going to have a new lieutenant by Christmas, and that Carlo was not coming back. Nobody said any of this out loud. They did not have to. The locket on the girl's neck said it for them, every time she walked down the street. Years later, when the Don was an old man and the girl was no longer thin, she ran Vincenzo's herself. She kept the corner table by the window for him. She kept the locket. She kept the small pink baby blanket in a glass case on the wall behind the bar, where nobody but the family really understood what it was. And on rainy Tuesday nights, when the dining room was full and the candles were lit and the rain hit the front window in that same soft way. She would sometimes touch the locket on her chest and remember the night she walked 9 miles through the rain with 3 letters scratched on the back of an old piece of silver, and a name she had not said in 15 years, and a door she was not sure would open. The door had opened, and he had been waiting on the other side of it the whole time without ever knowing it.